Are you really our child? My dad sighs as he looks at my report card. Growing up in a family of doctors, I always thought that following that path was the natural thing for me to do. So I've been studying hard since I was a child. And my grades have always been at the top of my class. But to my dad, a doctor himself, that's apparently not enough. He says it has to be at the national level, or it doesn't count. Hearing this again and again, I gradually grew to despise the profession of being a doctor. My name is Emily. Both my parents are doctors, and so are my relatives. I have an older sister, and my parents always assumed that my sister and I would naturally go into the medical field. My sister Jessica has always been exceptional and has been the favorite of our parents. Everyone thought Jessica would become a doctor, and she became one without any setbacks. I think that's impressive. But Jessica always got whatever she wanted, and she was praised, even for the smallest things. She was so indulged that I was envious. I was always being compared to Jessica, and I was always told that I wasn't good enough. Even though Jessica is 5 years older than me, the fact that I couldn't do what Jessica could do was treated like a failure on my part, when it should have been expected. Gradually, my parents stopped caring about me. When Jessica was stressed from studying, she would verbally abuse me, and sometimes she even raised her hand in anger at me. But I never told anyone, knowing that my parents wouldn't believe me. I went to a college preparatory school, but I have no intention of going to college. After constant verbal abuse, I left home. I was already working part-time, planning for this, and I had enough money to get by, for now. When I graduated from high school, I found a live-in job at a hotel in a tourist area, and they took me in. I needed my parents' consent because I was still a minor, but they wrote the consent form without a word. They probably just wanted me to leave, the failure that I was, as soon as possible. I hadn't contacted my family for over 6 months since leaving home, and I hadn't heard from them either. But as the end of the year approached, I got a call from Daddy. Come home for the New Year's celebration. The relatives are gathering, and you'll be the host. Daddy said just that and hung up without waiting for my response. At home, it's a tradition for relatives to gather for a feast every New Year's. Since the relatives are all doctors, it's always been a painful experience for me. And of course, I always end up doing the odd jobs. I'm responsible for everything, from cleaning the day before to preparing food, drinks, baths, and futons for the relatives who stay over. Mom just gives me instructions, and Jessica, of course, ignores me altogether. I've wondered why it has to be me, but I felt guilty about not pursuing a medical career, and it was easier to go along with it. I thought I wouldn't be called because I left home, but Daddy contacted me, so I decided to go home for just one day. My hotel job was, of course, in its busy season. I couldn't take a long break. I planned to go home and leave quickly, using my job as an excuse. When I got home that day, Daddy yelled at me. "You're late! Everyone's coming soon! Why didn't you come back yesterday?" But I'm busy at work this time of year, so it was hard to take even a day off. Stop making excuses! Hurry up and get ready! He wouldn't listen to me at all. Sighing, I entered the house where Mom was waiting. There was no feeling of relief coming back home. I just cleaned, cooked, and prepared drinks, as Mom told me to. As the relatives gathered and the party started, I was out of the loop, as usual, but that was more comfortable for me. Complaints about the hospital or gossip about patients, it was nothing but bad-mouthing others. I even thought that becoming a doctor made everyone talk bad about someone. For me, it was not a fun space at all. But Jessica seemed to enjoy mingling, looking down on other doctors and patients, making fun of them. As I carried drinks, Christopher approached me. "So, Emily, being a doctor was impossible for you, huh?" He said with a smirk, and I felt disgusted. I wanted to say that I hadn't failed to become a doctor, I just didn't want to. I don't want to be someone who can't live without demeaning others like you. I swallowed the words that almost came out, because it would only drain my energy to say them. Night came and I fled from my family home. My parents complained about how the cleaning would be done, who would entertain tomorrow, but I didn't care. I have to work early tomorrow. Without even bringing a change of clothes, I just said that and quickly boarded the bus home. That was the only contact from my family for a year. When it came, I thought, not again. Every year, I took a day off, went home, and immediately returned. It wasn't that I didn't find it bothersome, but it was only one day a year. I lived at home until I graduated from high school, and they even paid for my college preparatory school, despite not going to college. So I figured it wouldn't hurt to show my face at home that much. 7 years have passed since then, and I'm now 25. I still visit home once a year, unchanged. It's that time of year again. I should be hearing from Daddy soon. Just as I started thinking that, the phone rang. I assumed it was Daddy, but when I looked at the screen, an unexpected name was displayed. I pressed the call button. Jessica? I hardly ever get a call from Jessica. I picked up the phone fearfully, thinking something might have happened to my parents, but contrary to my fears, Jessica was in high spirit. Hey, you know the young CEO at your workplace? He's been on TV a lot lately, hasn't he? She said with an excited voice. This attitude from Jessica was a first. I was confused and a bit scared. He has opened a few new hotels, so he has had more opportunities to be on TV. As I said that, Jessica happily replied, "Introduce me to him! I fell in love with him when I saw him on TV the other day. Plus, he's a young master, right? I think he'd suit me." I was at a loss for words. To think she'd contact me for something like this. What does she mean by suit me? Gentle Alexander and Jessica, who likes to look down on others, would never match. While I was lost for words, Jessica continued the conversation. "Oh, I see. You, a lowly worker, wouldn't have a chance to be close to the CEO. Maybe you've never even met him. Even if you have, a plain woman like you wouldn't stay in his memory." Even though I didn't respond, Jessica kept talking, satisfying herself. I tried to interrupt, but Jessica's momentum was unstoppable. "That's right. Do you know when the CEO will come to your place? I'll stay over that day. If I can meet him face to face, he's mine. He won't resist a beauty like me. So make a reservation and let me know. Of course, since I'm going out of my way to stay over, you'll have to cover the lodging costs." I was speechless. "But Jessica, aren't you having arranged meetings for marriage?" "In our family, it's customary to be married by 30, and many go through arranged meetings. I thought Jessica had done that already. But what does this mean?" "Arranged meetings? There's no one decent. The other day, it was a 35-year-old guy. Introduced me to someone who matches me." I was disheartened by hearing that. So Jessica looks down on even her arranged meeting partners. That doesn't mean I have to introduce her to Alexander. I told her it was impossible, and hung up the phone. A month later, on New Year's Day, I went back home for just one day. I planned to entertain my relatives as usual, and then leave quickly. But this year, my relatives were unusually intrusive. "You work at a hotel, don't you, Emily? I can't believe you can keep up such a low-end job," Christopher said, followed by Mom saying, "Indeed, we're impressed you can do a job that's not as essential as ours." Even Daddy chimed in. "I'm glad you left the house early. Now I don't have to hear from the neighbors about what you're doing." "I'm sorry I'm such an embarrassment. I knew they felt that way, but hearing it all at once was indeed sad." As I was disheartened, Jessica said, laughing, "You don't have any redeeming qualities, so you'll be alone forever, right? What will you do?" Her words made my sadness disappear. I wanted to give it right back to her. I had finally released the emotions I'd been holding back against Jessica. "Jessica, you're 30, aren't you? You're 5 years older than me. What are you going to do? If you keep having such high expectations, you'll be left behind." I blurted out those words, and Daddy was furious. "How dare you say that about Jessica? Apologize, now!" My parents were always on Jessica's side. Jessica was their only darling. If that's the case, I wish they would live as a family of 3, forever. I sighed, ignoring Daddy's rage. That seemed to make Daddy even angrier. "What's with that attitude? Who do you think raised you this far?" Mom was nodding beside Daddy. The relatives were the same. It was the consensus of all the relatives. I felt completely fed up with that thought. But before I could open my mouth, Daddy yelled, "You, a failure like you, are ashamed of our family. Get out, now!" The expression on his face was clearly mocking me. I took a deep breath and opened my mouth. "I won't be coming here anymore after this year." I said that, picked up my belongings, and headed for the entrance. "Thank you for everything, up to now." Then I heard the sound of a car outside. When I opened the door with my shoes on, a luxury car was parked there. My parents and Jessica had noticed the car's sound and came out. A man was getting out of the driver's seat. Jessica was the first to recognize the person. You, president? It was Alexander, the president of my company, the person Jessica had asked me to introduce before. Alexander bowed and began to walk toward the entrance. Jessica said excitedly, "Emily, could it be that you—" It seemed like she wanted to say, "Are you going to introduce him?" I laughed. "Sorry to keep you waiting, I was just leaving," I said to Alexander, and he also smiled. "Thought it was about time, so I came to pick you up." Our conversation left my parents and Jessica in a state of shock. Behind them, I could see the faces of the relatives who had come out to see what was happening. Daddy was staring at Alexander, dumbfounded. Alexander walked up to Daddy. "I apologize for my late greeting." Following that, I leaned close to Alexander and said, "He's my fiancé. We're getting married next month." "Huh?" Was that Jessica's voice, my parents' voice, or both? I said with a laugh. "But I have no intention of inviting you to the wedding. I have no lingering attachment to this house, so I don't think I'll be coming back. It seems this wasn't the place for me to return to, after all." After Alexander proposed to me, he said he wanted to greet my parents, so I explained my situation up until now. Everyone noticed the problem in my family due to my reluctance to go home, and they understood once they heard about the bad reputation of the hospital. Jessica had spoken about it too, so Alexander decided to come and pick me up. Ignoring my stunned family, I continued. "Speaking of which, there's a new hotel opening near Daddy's hospital. I'm involved in the project, and when I was doing the local research, I found out that Daddy's place has been involved in multiple medical malpractice and scandals. Is that right?" Daddy's face changed color at this. "You're not involved in this, are you, Daddy?" The local people were so shocked by the bad reputation. Jessica works there too. "Are you sure it's okay?" According to the locals, the reputation of Daddy and Jessica is the worst. I was shocked to hear from the locals, like father, like daughter, referring to Daddy and Jessica. At that time, I also heard that Daddy and Jessica were causing scandals, and I felt somewhat responsible for it. That's why I'm excited to make the hotel business a success and please the locals. In contrast, Daddy and Jessica looked pale. Since I had told my fiancé Alexander everything, he simply opened the passenger door without any unnecessary interruption. I met Alexander right after leaving home. Under the previous president's policy, Alexander, the next president, was working in the field, and we became close friends. I heard later that he fell in love with me at first sight. Unlike before, where I was constantly denied, the more I worked hard, the more I was appreciated. I worked hard because I enjoyed it. He seemed to like that attitude too. Alexander took over as president after the previous one fell ill and proposed to me about 6 months ago. His words asking for my support resonated with me. Since accepting the proposal, I've been learning various things, focusing on business studies. I realized that I don't hate studying, but rather enjoy gaining various knowledge. What I hated was studying only to become a doctor. When I find something fun, I tend to look into it, and the more knowledge I gain, the more I want to do. As I was about to get into the car, Daddy yelled, "Hey, Emily, what's going on?" But I smiled and said, "I'm no longer a daughter of this house. Goodbye." Leaving my confused family behind, the car quietly drove off. Later, the new hotel opened successfully, and I was busy working on site from the first day when it was fully booked. Then my parents and Jessica came. Daddy, who spotted me, called out, "We came to see what kind of work you're doing, and to stay over. Prepare the room, quickly." I wanted to ask what nerve he had, but I was too busy managing the site. Seeing this, Alexander rushed over to send my family away, but they stubbornly caused a commotion in the lobby. Since I wasn't getting anywhere, I had the security guard step in. Then a woman named Olivia, who came into the lobby afterward, exclaimed, "Oh, it's you, the teacher." I later heard that she's a nurse at Daddy's hospital, and she doesn't think highly of Daddy and Jessica due to their arrogant attitudes. Seeing Daddy being escorted by the security guard, she seemingly found it amusing and shared it as a funny story at work. Olivia, it turns out, is a neighbor and friend to the front desk staff, and one of them told me about it. Naturally, the rumor spread throughout the hospital, causing Daddy and Jessica some embarrassment. As for Mom, she used to work at the same hospital, but has since retired. However, her retirement was in name only, as the truth was she was forced to quit due to a scandal. I accidentally heard Olivia slip this information. I had another job to attend to and was at a different hotel when my parents and Jessica came to the hotel again. Frustrated at their audacity, I had no hesitation in calling the police, and they were taken away for obstruction of business. Because of Daddy and Jessica's past behavior, the rumor quickly spread in the hospital. The hospital, already struggling financially, was apparently forced to shut down. Passing by my family's home a little while later, I saw it was vacant. They must have sold it out of financial desperation. I also heard rumors that Jessica's attempts at matchmaking had failed, so maybe various local gossip forced them to leave. I've changed my cell number, so they can't contact me. And of course, I have no intention of contacting them either. With the opening of the new hotel settled, I'm looking forward to my wedding next month. With wonderful Alexander by my side, both my work and personal life are looking brighter than ever.